All right, so we're diving deep into the electric vehicle market in 2025.
Buckle up.
Yeah, get ready, because things are about to get interesting. We've got a whole stack of articles and reports here, all about where EVs are headed in the next few years.
Sounds electrifying.
It is, and from what I'm seeing, global EV sales are absolutely exploding. We're talking millions of vehicles taking a serious chunk of the market share.
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing too. But it's not like it's a uniform surge.
Right, it's not a one-size-fits-all situation.
Exactly.
There are some major regional differences when it comes to EV growth, and it seems like everything from government policies to charging infrastructure is playing a role.
For sure.
Like I'm seeing a lot about China becoming a real powerhouse in the EV market. They've even got companies like BYD giving Tesla a run for its money.
Yeah, BYD is definitely one to watch.
For sure. Then you've got India's EV market, which is expected to more than double in the next year.
That's right. It's going to be huge.
And then there's this whole other angle emerging with the used EV market, opening up more affordable options.
Right. Yeah, that's going to be a game changer for a lot of people.
For real. It feels like we're at a turning point here. So to help us make sense of all of it, let's bring in our expert to help break down these trends and kind of help us understand where this crazy ride is taking us.
I'm happy to help. The global EV market is definitely at an exciting point right now. You're right, the growth is phenomenal, and it's really interesting to see how different regions are approaching this whole EV transition.
Yeah, so let's start with the big picture. These reports are showing some seriously impressive numbers, like a projected 30% jump in global EV sales for 2025. And EVs are expected to grab a 16.7% share of the total vehicle market.
Wow.
I know. Those are some big numbers. What do you think is driving this massive surge?
Well, it's a bunch of things all happening at the same time, but environmental concerns are definitely playing a role. People are becoming more aware of the impact of gas cars on the planet, and they're looking for cleaner options.
Yeah, but it can't just be about the environment, can it?
Right.
I'm guessing there's more to the story.
Oh, absolutely. Technology is a big factor. Advancements in technology are making EVs more and more attractive. Battery tech is improving really quickly, which means longer ranges and faster charging times. Plus, EVs are becoming more sophisticated with things like advanced driver assistance systems, smart connectivity, and really cool designs.
Yeah, I've noticed there's a lot of buzz around these new infotainment systems.
Yeah.
It seems like EVs are becoming as much about technology and connectivity as they are about transportation.
Exactly. People are looking for that seamless integrated experience, and EVs are delivering on that front. And let's not forget about the role of government policies. Lots of countries are incentivizing EV adoption through tax credits, subsidies, and regulations that are promoting cleaner transportation. All of this is creating a more favorable environment for EV growth.
Right, and I'm seeing that reflected in these reports. Like Europe, for example, is projected to see like a 43.4% surge in EV sales this year, making it the fastest growing major region. Yeah, and that seems to be largely driven by those strong government policies and incentives. So it looks like it's a combination of consumer demand, tech advancements, and government support all working together to create this EV boom.
That's a really great observation. It's definitely a multifaceted phenomenon, and it's creating a really dynamic and rapidly evolving landscape. But it's super important to remember that this transition isn't happening in the same way across the globe.
You're right. One of the things that really stood out to me was China's dominance in the EV market. I mean, they're projected to hold a 29.7% market share in 2025, which is remarkable.
Yeah, it's huge.
What do you think is fueling their success?
Well, China has been really proactive about promoting EVs. They've invested a ton in charging infrastructure, provided generous subsidies to buyers, and even implemented quotas for EV production by automakers.
Yeah.
This combination of government support and industry investment has created like a breeding ground for EV growth.
That makes sense. But I'm also seeing that their projected growth rate is kind of slowing down a bit, around 19.7%. Is this a sign that their market is starting to mature?
It could be. As a market matures, the early adopters have already made their purchases, and the growth naturally slows down. But there's also a shift happening within China's EV market that's worth noting. Domestic manufacturers like BYD are quickly gaining market share, even surpassing Tesla in some areas.
Oh yeah, BYD surpassing Tesla in deliveries was something I noticed too. So is BYD like the new Tesla?
Well, it's a bit more complicated than that. BYD's success is partly because they're focusing on more affordable models, which appeal to a much wider range of people in China. Plus, they've been really aggressive in expanding their product line and making big investments in battery technology.
So it's not just about undercutting Tesla on price, they're actually bringing some serious competition when it comes to tech and innovation.
Exactly. And this is putting pressure on Western manufacturers who are now facing a way more competitive landscape in a market that used to dominate. This shift in market dynamics is definitely something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, for sure. It's clear that China's EV market is a major player.
Absolutely.
So let's shift gears and talk about the US market. Are we lagging behind?
Not really. The US is projected to see good growth of 36% in EV sales, reaching an 11.2% market share in 2025. While that's lower than Europe's projected 43.4% growth, it still shows real progress.
So we're on the right track, but there's room for improvement. What are the key things influencing the US EV market?
Similar to China, government policies and incentives are super important. The Biden administration has made it really clear that they're prioritizing EVs, and they've implemented a lot of programs to encourage adoption.
Right, like I'm seeing a lot about tax credits for EV buyers, investments in charging infrastructure, and stricter emission standards for automakers. It feels like the government is really trying to make things happen.
Yeah, they are, and it's working. But there's also a growing competitive landscape within the US market. Tesla, the longtime leader, is now facing some serious challenges from traditional car companies like GM and Ford, who are really pushing into the EV space.
That's interesting. I'm curious to see how that competition plays out.
Yeah.
Will those traditional automakers be able to catch up to Tesla's innovation and that brand recognition? Or will Tesla manage to hold on to its lead?
It's a great question. I think the answer is going to come down to how well they adapt and innovate. Tesla has a head start with technology and brand image, but those traditional automakers have the advantage of scale manufacturing expertise and those established distribution networks.
It's like a battle between the disruptor and the giants.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see who wins.
Right.
But before we move on to other regions, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier, the role of technology in driving EV adoption.
Right.
So let's talk tech. What are some of the big tech advancements that are making EVs more attractive to people?
Okay, so like we talked about before, battery technology is at the forefront of all of this. Batteries are getting more energy dense, which means longer ranges. They're also charging faster, which is addressing one of the big concerns that potential EV buyers have.
Yeah, range anxiety is a real thing.
Yeah.
People want to know they can get where they need to go without always worrying about running out of power. So those advancements in battery tech are huge.
Absolutely, and it's not just about the batteries themselves. We're seeing big improvements in charging infrastructure too. The number of fast charging stations is increasing fast, making it easier for EV owners to top up their batteries on the go.
That makes sense. The easier and less stressful the charging experience, the more attractive EVs are going to be to the average person.
Totally. And it's not just about the practical side of driving and charging. EVs are becoming super sophisticated in terms of their features and tech. They're equipped with advanced driver assistance systems like lane keeping assist and adaptive cruise control, which make them safer and more convenient. Plus, they're becoming super connected with features like over-the-air software updates, real-time traffic info, and seamless integration with smartphones and smart homes.
Yeah, those infotainment systems are wild. It's like having a giant tablet right on your dashboard. It seems like EVs are becoming more like tech gadgets on wheels, which is pretty cool, especially for younger people who are into tech.
Exactly. EVs are tapping into that desire for being connected and having a high-tech driving experience. And this trend is only going to get bigger in the next few years.
That's really cool. It sounds like the EV revolution is about a change in what people want and expect as much as it is about the technology itself. People want more than just a way to get around. They want an experience.
Exactly. And EVs are delivering on that. They're giving us a glimpse into the future of transportation, one that is cleaner, more connected, and way more technologically advanced.
This is all super fascinating.
Right.
We've already covered a lot, from the global EV boom to the role of tech and what's happening in markets like China and the US, but there's still so much more to explore.
For sure.
In the next part of our deep dive, I want to look closer at some of the challenges and roadblocks on the way to EVs becoming mainstream. We'll also dig into some of the less obvious trends that are shaping the future of the EV market, like used EVs and those groundbreaking battery technologies we talked about. So stay tuned for more exciting stuff.
Sounds good. You know, one region we haven't really talked about yet is India, and they're actually set for some massive growth in the EV market. Like, their market is expected to more than double, hitting a projected 7.5% market share. What's interesting is how their path to EV adoption is kind of different from, say, China or the US.
Oh yeah, that is interesting. We touched on it briefly at the beginning, but what makes India's situation so unique?
Well, there are a few things coming together that are creating like a perfect storm for EV growth in India. For one, the Indian government has been really proactive about pushing for cleaner transportation solutions. They've set some pretty ambitious targets for EV adoption, and implemented all kinds of incentives to encourage both the car companies and the buyers.
So it sounds like government support is a big factor there, just like in China.
Yeah, definitely. But it's not the only thing driving this. Another key element is that there's a rising demand for affordable transportation in India. Motorcycles and scooters are super popular there, and that's where we're seeing a big jump in electric models. Companies like Ola Electric and Aether Energy are making these electric scooters that are stylish, affordable, and really practical for getting around in India's busy cities.
So they're kind of catering to the existing market and what people already want, which makes sense. It seems like a pretty smart strategy.
It is. And that focus on making EVs affordable is really important for getting a lot of people to adopt them in a market where price is a big factor. But there's another thing that often gets overlooked, and that's the impact of ride-hailing services. Companies like Uber and Ola are switching their fleets to electric in India, which puts more EVs on the road and exposes more people to electric mobility.
Oh, that's a good point. It's like a ripple effect.
Mhm.
By going electric themselves, these ride-hailing companies are not only reducing their own carbon footprint, but also showing EVs to a wider audience, which could maybe influence what people decide to buy in the future.
Exactly. It's a subtle way to make electric mobility seem more normal and show how practical it can be in everyday life.
It's pretty cool to see how all these different factors are working together to make such a dynamic EV market in India. It really shows how the path to EV adoption can be so different depending on the region, the infrastructure, and even cultural preferences.
Yeah, you're right. There's no one-size-fits-all solution when it comes to EVs. Each region has its own unique set of challenges and opportunities, and the best strategies are going to be the ones that are tailored to that specific context.
Now, shifting gears a bit, one of the things I found really interesting in these reports is the emergence of a pretty strong used EV market. It seems like this is opening up a whole new way for people to go electric without spending a ton of money. Can you talk a little more about that?
Definitely. The used EV market is becoming a major force, and it's doing a lot to make electric mobility more accessible. As more people lease EVs and those early adopters trade up for newer models, there are more and more used EVs becoming available.
Makes sense.
Mhm.
But are those used EVs actually a good deal? Like, how does the battery hold up over time? I know that's something a lot of people are worried about.
It's a valid concern, but battery technology has improved a lot in recent years. EV batteries are built to last for a good number of years and charge cycles. Plus, lots of manufacturers offer warranties on their batteries, which gives buyers some peace of mind.
So it's not like buying a used gas car where you're worried about the engine wearing out.
Exactly. And because EVs have fewer moving parts than traditional cars, they generally need less maintenance overall. This makes used EVs a pretty attractive option for people who are on a budget and want to experience the benefits of driving electric without the high cost of a brand new model.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
Sounds like the used EV market could really change the game and make EVs more accessible to way more people. Now, I can't let you go without talking about the future of battery technology. I'm seeing all this buzz about solid-state batteries. What's the big deal?
Well, solid-state batteries are kind of like the holy grail of EV tech. They have the potential to totally revolutionize the industry by offering some major advantages over the current lithium-ion batteries.
Okay, I'm listening. What makes them so special?
First, solid-state batteries are way more energy dense than lithium-ion batteries. That means that they can store more energy in the same amount of space, which translates to much longer ranges for EVs. Imagine being able to drive hundreds of miles further on a single charge.
That would definitely put an end to range anxiety.
Exactly. And that's not all. Solid-state batteries also charge a lot faster than lithium-ion batteries. We're talking potentially charging your EV in the same amount of time it takes to fill up a gas tank.
Wow, that would be amazing. No more waiting around at charging stations.
Mhm.
But are there any downsides to this magical battery tech?
Well, the main challenge right now is the cost. Solid-state batteries are still really expensive to make, which is why they haven't become mainstream yet. But research is moving fast, and lots of experts think the cost will come down a lot in the next few years.
So it's a waiting game, but a promising one. It sounds like solid-state batteries could really unlock the next level of EV performance and make them even more convenient.
Absolutely. They could potentially solve some of the biggest problems holding back widespread EV adoption, making driving electric even more appealing and practical for the average person.
Okay, so we've got these super exciting advancements in battery tech coming up. But what about the other side of things? Charging infrastructure. We talked about it a little earlier, but I want to dig a little deeper. What are some of the big challenges and opportunities when it comes to building a really strong charging network that can handle all those EVs hitting the road?
That's a really important question. Expanding charging infrastructure is absolutely crucial for the EV market to keep growing. One of the biggest challenges is making sure there are enough charging stations, especially fast charging stations in both cities and rural areas. We need to get rid of those charging deserts you mentioned before.
Right, because range anxiety isn't just about how far the car can go. It's also about knowing you'll be able to find a charger when you need one.
Exactly. And it's not just about quantity, it's about making charging easy and convenient. Charging stations need to be located in places that make sense, like shopping centers, workplaces, and along highways. Plus, the whole charging process needs to be as smooth and user-friendly as possible.
Sounds like there's a lot going on here.
Yeah.
So who's taking the lead on building out this charging infrastructure? Is it mostly the government, or are private companies playing a big part?
It's actually a mix of both. Governments are offering incentives and money to help develop charging infrastructure. But private companies are also getting involved. We're seeing a lot of investment from energy companies, charging network operators, and even car companies themselves.
Yeah, car companies are getting involved in building charging stations. Why would they do that?
It's a smart move. By investing in charging infrastructure, they can make their EVs more attractive to buyers because it addresses those range anxiety concerns. It's about creating a whole system that supports the entire EV experience.
That's clever. It's like they're breaking down the barriers and making it easier for people to go electric. Are there any other cool trends or developments happening in the world of charging infrastructure?
One thing that's gaining momentum is the idea of using renewable energy to power charging stations. Imagine charging your EV with solar or wind power, which would make it even more eco-friendly.
That would be awesome. Truly sustainable transportation.
That's the goal that lots of companies and governments are working towards. And it's not just about being good for the environment. Using renewable energy can also make us less dependent on fossil fuels and boost energy security.
Okay, so we've got this complex mix of technology, consumer demand, and government policies all shaping the EV market. But we haven't really talked about the potential problems and obstacles. What are some of the speed bumps we might hit on the road to EVs becoming mainstream?
Well, despite all the positive stuff happening, there are definitely some hurdles we need to overcome. One of the biggest challenges is cost EVs are still generally more expensive than similar gas-powered cars, even though the price difference is getting smaller.
Yeah, I've noticed that the initial price can be a turnoff for a lot of people, even with those government incentives.
Right. And then there's the issue of range. While battery tech is improving fast range, anxiety is still a real concern for a lot of potential EV buyers, especially people who drive long distances frequently.
I get that.
Yeah.
Until we have a really reliable network of fast charging stations, those long road trips are going to require some extra planning.
Exactly. And then there's the problem of supply chain constraints. The demand for EV batteries and other components is skyrocketing, and this is putting a strain on the global supply chain. There's a rush to get the raw materials needed for battery production, like lithium and cobalt, and this could cause price swings and potential delays in making EVs.
So even if people want EVs, there might not be enough to go around. That's a problem.
It could be. And it shows how important it is to have a more diverse and resilient supply chain. We need to look into alternative battery chemistries, figure out more efficient ways to manufacture things, and become less reliant on just a few key suppliers.
Sounds like a tricky challenge, but one that we need to solve if we want the EV market to grow sustainably. Are there any other potential roadblocks we should be thinking about?
One concern is having enough skilled workers. As the EV industry expands, we're going to need a workforce that knows how to design, manufacture, and maintain these complex vehicles. That means investing in education and training programs to make sure we have the skilled people needed to support this transition.
Right. It's not just about building the cars, it's about having people who can build them and fix them.
Exactly. And then there's the issue of what people think about EVs. Even with all the progress we've made, there's still a lot of misconceptions and myths about EVs. Some people think they're unreliable, not practical, or just too expensive.
Yeah, I've heard those arguments too. It seems like we still need to do a lot of educating and raise awareness to address those misconceptions and show people the real benefits of EVs.
Absolutely. We need to bust those myths, showcase the advantages, and make EVs seem like a more realistic and relatable option for everyday people.
Okay, so there are some challenges and obstacles to think about, but it's obvious that the EV revolution is happening. In the last part of our deep dive, I want to look ahead to the future. What are some of the big trends and innovations that are shaping the next chapter of the EV story? What can we expect to see in the coming years? So we've talked about all of this crazy growth in the EV market, the race to build the best batteries, and even the rise of used EVs.
It's a lot to keep track of.
It is, but there's one more piece of this puzzle that I think is super important: government policies. It seems like governments all over the world are really stepping up and trying to push this EV revolution in a certain direction.
Yeah, you're totally right. Government policies are a huge factor in how the EV market is developing. They can really help things move faster, or they can actually slow things down.
So let's talk about those policies. What are some of the big things that governments are doing to try and get more people to buy EVs?
Well, one of the most common things is offering financial incentives to make EVs more affordable.
Right.
We're seeing different kinds of tax credits, subsidies, and rebates in different countries. Like in the US, there's a federal tax credit of up to $7,500 for people who buy EVs. And some states even offer extra incentives on top of that.
Yeah, those incentives can really make a difference, especially when you're talking about those higher-priced EVs.
Yeah.
What else are governments doing besides trying to make EVs cheaper?
Another big focus is investing in charging infrastructure. They're putting money into building public charging stations, especially those fast charging ones, which are really important for dealing with range anxiety. They're also giving incentives to businesses and homeowners to install chargers, which is helping to create a more widespread and accessible charging network.
So it's like a two-pronged approach to make EVs more affordable and make it easier to charge them. Seems pretty logical. Are there any other policy trends we should be paying attention to?
One interesting thing is that a lot of countries are setting stricter emission standards for cars. They're setting ambitious goals to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from transportation, and this is putting pressure on car companies to make more EVs and fewer gas guzzlers.
So it's kind of a carrot and stick approach. Incentives to encourage people to buy EVs and regulations to push the car companies in the right direction. And it seems to be working, at least based on all the growth we're seeing in the EV market.
Yeah, those policies are definitely helping things move along, but it's important to remember that government involvement can also have some downsides.
That's true. We talked earlier about how policy changes can create uncertainty in the market. What are some of the risks we need to be aware of?
Well, one concern is that governments might reduce or even get rid of those EV subsidies as the market grows. That could make EVs less affordable and maybe slow down how quickly people adopt them.
Yeah, that would be a bummer, especially for people who are depending on those incentives to make buying an EV work financially.
For sure. And there's always the risk that policies might change. If governments keep changing their minds or create regulations that are hard to predict, it makes it tough for both car companies and consumers to plan for the future. Imagine putting a lot of money into a new EV model, only to have the government suddenly change the rules about incentives or emission standards. That could really mess things up.
So having stable and consistent policies is really important for a healthy EV market. It's not just about having policies, it's about having policies that people can count on.
Exactly. When governments are clear about their goals and create a supportive environment, it gives everyone the confidence to invest in this transition to electric vehicles.
Now, there's one more policy area I want to talk about before we finish up. We mentioned it briefly earlier: inter-vehicle emissions trading. Can you explain how that works and why it's becoming such a big deal in the EV market?
Sure. Inter-vehicle emissions trading basically lets EV makers team up with traditional car companies to combine their fleets to meet those emission standards. So if a traditional car company is having trouble meeting those stricter standards with their gas-powered cars, they can basically offset those emissions by partnering with an EV maker who has extra emissions credits because their cars don't have any tailpipe emissions.
So it's a way for car companies to balance out their overall emissions and avoid getting penalized. But how does this help the EV market?
Well, it gives those traditional car companies a financial reason to make more EVs. They can either invest in developing their own EVs or work with existing EV makers to get those emissions credits. It's a way to make things fairer and encourage the shift to EVs, even among those car companies that might have been hesitant about electric cars before.
That's interesting. It's almost like a market-driven way to get more EVs on the road.
It is, and it's becoming more common in places like Europe and California. It's a policy tool that could be a big factor in the next wave of EV growth.
So it sounds like government policies are kind of a mixed bag. They can be a really powerful way to get more people driving EVs, but they can also create some uncertainty and maybe even slow things down. What's the most important thing for our listeners to keep in mind when it comes to EV policies?
I think the most important thing is to stay informed. Keep up with the EV policies in your area and understand how they might affect your decision to buy an EV or invest in the industry. Knowing what's going on is really important in this rapidly changing landscape.
So do your research understand the incentives and regulations and be ready for things to change? Don't just assume that the policies in place today will still be the same tomorrow.
Exactly. The EV market is still pretty new, and those policies are constantly changing. Staying informed will help you navigate this exciting but complex world.
Well, we've covered a ton of ground in this deep dive. We talked about the global EV boom, the race for the best batteries, the rise of used EVs, and the huge role of government policies. It's clear that the EV revolution is happening all around us.
It's an amazing time to be watching this transformation in the car industry. The choices we make today are going to shape the future of transportation for a long time.
So as EV technology keeps getting better and becomes more and more mainstream, how do you think the world of cars is going to change in the next few years? That's something to think about as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of EVs. We've only just scratched the surface, but hopefully we've piqued your interest in giving you some food for thought. Keep your eye on these trends and you'll be ahead of the game as this EV revolution unfolds. Thanks for joining us.